All right, according to reports, Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard is now consolidating power inside of Iran. In other words, the hardline radicals who have terrorized the world for decades are likely running the show. The guys with guns, not the guys in the suits that'll be in Pakistan. Here with more. Fox News strategic analyst, our friend General Jack Keane is with us. General, great to have you. If we were going to be very blunt and very, very honest, General, the easier path for the president would be to wipe them out, obliterate them, hit all those targets. But the reality is the president really deep down does not want to do that to the Iranian people. I applaud him for that. And he's going the extra mile. However, when there's a report out tonight, the Iranian parliamentary speaker saying that they have new cards to play against the U.S. You have Iran's new IRGC chief, one of the hardliners from days gone by, now in charge of the guns. I'm less optimistic than I was over the weekend.
Yeah, sure. Well, you have cause to be, Sean, to be frank. I think what we're witnessing right before our eyes is a power struggle inside of Iran. And yes, Gallup, while he was a general in the IRGC at one point, right along with Hannity, who is now the head general in the IRGC. Gallup does represent the political side of it because he's the head speaker in the parliament. And I think they are really at odds. We have talked to Gallup in the past, and so we know for a fact that he is willing to make some compromises on the deal. In other words, some concessions to the United States. It's likely, we don't know for a fact, but Hannity disagrees with all of that. And this power struggle is going on, and what will be the resolution of it? There's a couple of paths here. One, take President Trump serious, that if you don't come to the negotiating table and the ceasefire ends, by the way, it's Wednesday, not Tuesday it ends, and if it ends on Wednesday and he promises to go back to full combat operations. But so our audience understands, we have twice the capability on the U.S. side in the theater now than when we started the war. We have never given up bringing in additional assets to assist with the execution of our wartime objectives. The Israelis, who had some ammunition shortages, have full magazine depth now. So if we go back to combat operations, they are going to be absolutely full throttle and considerably more dramatic than anything the Iranians have experienced, to include all the targets the president is talking about and then some. But Hannity, listen, hardliners here. Hannity has a couple of choices here. One, okay, work it out with Gallup and let's not test the president. Let's go to the negotiations, but put some strict controls on Gallup in those negotiations. Or, and they're capable of this, Sean, test the president and accept going back to combat operations, because in the end, where they are, they believe that the president will not go completely to the end of it. The pressure on him politically and economically will force him to end it prematurely, and they'll still be standing, and they'll have leverage as a result of it. And no negotiations taking place at all is what he is possibly thinking. And I'm trying to put my head inside a bona fide hardliner who was the guy that was in charge of the Quds Force, and guess who he gave that job over to? Qasem Soleimani. So this is the ilk of what we're dealing with here. I just wanted our viewers to understand some of the thought processes that may be going on here, and even the extreme that I'm mentioning, and why wouldn't they accept what's plausible and also reasonable? Well, because this is the Iranians, and we got long time history with how unreasonable they actually are, and they don't care about their people. They care about what? Personal survival, the regime surviving. That is it. And they don't care about what's best for their people. And if we're going to pound Iran, and we would, to seriously force an economic collapse, that's what would be on the horizon. It would be less about their weapons and more about their future, for sure, here in terms of their viability economically. In Hannity's mind, if he survives that, he wins. Now, that is diabolical thinking for sure, but that is part of the rationale. We have been dealing with these people for a long time, Sean.
After 14 bunker buster bombs, that war ended in 12 days. That was phase one, Midnight Hammer. I'm trying to understand, after all that President Trump has done here and all the damage he has inflicted upon them, how they could doubt in any way, shape, manner, or form his resolve to do it the hard way if he has to. And I want your reaction to that. And what about this warning about we have new cards to play? I take that as typical, quintessential propaganda and bluster. Your thoughts?
Yeah, well, we know our president, and you would think the Iranians by now would know him as well. He has a tendency to follow through here, and that's the reality of it. So he's promising something that be much more significant and dramatic impact on them than what we have been doing to date. And I think he will absolutely deliver on that. He's also making a point, and certainly we understand this, that in our negotiations, while he's willing to talk, he's not going to put up with a bad deal. That is a fact, because he understands and knows what a bad deal looked like. He walked away from one, as we all know, in 2018, 3 years into Obama's bad deal. So are they making assessments of the president? Of course they are. But they also, I think, where Vahedi's coming from, he believes there's significant pressure on the president. And it may be worth his while to try to accept whatever the president wants to give him. I think that is absolutely reckless thinking, and he's not being rational. But I'm just trying to paint a picture here of what can be going on. Hopefully, the best answer for the Iranians would be is whatever this debate is about, resolve it and get some negotiators in to sit down at the table with our negotiators and see if something can be worked out here. And certainly the United States has huge leverage here. The fact we can't dismiss the major leverage we have. In the first negotiations, we had the threat of going back to combat operations for sure. In the second negotiations, which we're about to take, the number one leverage we have is we have shut down all of Iranian exports, oil and everything else they export. And the reality of that is that's 80% of their revenue. That is huge leverage in of itself. The second piece of leverage we have, Sean, is what I mentioned, full throttle combat operations. So we are going into these negotiations holding a lot of cards in our hands, and actually a stronger hand than we had in the last negotiations. President Trump knows that. Our negotiators know that. Gallup certainly understands that. I think Vahedi probably understands it as well, the head of the IRGC. It remains to be seen what his reaction is going to be to all of this. I think we'll know within 12 to 20 hours for sure.
One thing I would love to see, the Israelis, somehow arms get in the hands of the people. Vahedi and others I don't think would survive. 180% inflation rate. Their currency is now worthless, on top of the fact that they have half their workforce not working. This will be devastating. Hopefully the Iranian people will then wake up. That becomes their moment of truth, too. General, as always, we appreciate you being with us. We appreciate your insights, sir. Thank you. All right, thanks for watching. Check out my new podcast, Hanging Out with me, Sean Hannity. The big interviews, the debates you won't get anywhere else. Like and subscribe for new episodes every Tuesday and Thursday.